I stood outside the wedding venue in a navy blue dress I had ironed twice that morning. No one noticed me, no one expected me, and when the planner said, "I'm sorry, there's no seat for you," I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just walked away quietly. What no one knew was that I paid for the entire wedding. Every flower, every fork, every bottle of champagne, and I hadn't signed the final payment yet. So I canceled it, all of it. The flowers never arrived, the band packed up, the lights went dark, and the story didn't end there. It exploded. Across social media, local news, and into a courtroom. But this isn't about revenge. This is about what happens when a woman who spent her whole life being silent finally says, "Enough." You see, I wasn't just erased, I was underestimated, and they'll never do that again. The house was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ribs. Evelyn Mathers moved through her small kitchen with a practiced grace, filling the kettle, slicing a single apple for breakfast. At 67, she had mastered solitude, not embraced it, but learned how to breathe through it. Her home in a modest suburb of Ohio was clean and lived in, filled with books, plants, and framed photographs, mostly of a little boy with round cheeks and a bowl haircut. Daniel, her son, the love of her life. She had been 29 when her husband left. The note had been short. "It's not working. I need to feel alive again." Evelyn didn't scream. She packed his things neatly, left them on the porch, and locked the door. Daniel was only 4 then, just starting to read. He had cried for days, asking when Daddy would come back. Evelyn never lied. She just held him and said, "I'm still here." And she always was. Every lunch packed, every fever nursed at 2 a.m., every spelling bee and chorus recital. Evelyn was in the front row, clapping until her hands stung. She worked as a high school English teacher during the day and tutored at night. On weekends, she cleaned offices. Summers, she took on catalog proofreading gigs. She never dated seriously again. Not because she wasn't asked, but because each time she saw a man's eyes glance at her son with anything less than full affection, she pulled away. She refused to risk Daniel feeling second place in his own home. When he was 10, she opened a secret savings account. Not for college, that she covered with scholarships and extra shifts, but for something else. One day, she told herself, when he finds someone he loves, he won't have to worry about how to pay for the day he says, "I do." It became a ritual. Every holiday she skipped to save money, every new outfit she passed by in the store, every trip she didn't take, it all went into the wedding fund. She called it the someday jar. Though it was no jar at all, but a growing number on a quiet bank statement. And she never told Daniel. He deserved joy, she thought. A wedding where everything went smoothly, where he didn't have to carry the weight of money the way she had. She imagined him smiling at the altar, glancing back to where she'd be sitting, front row, handkerchief in hand, tears of pride. Not because she bought it, but because she built it, brick by quiet brick. Daniel had always been a sensitive child, allergic to peanuts, scared of thunderstorms, the kind of boy who hugged too long and asked big questions at bedtime. Why did Daddy leave? Will we always be just us? Evelyn always answered with care. Sometimes people leave, but I will always stay, she'd whisper, brushing his hair back as he drifted to sleep. She thought of all the birthday cakes she made from scratch, every Halloween costume she stitched, even when the money barely stretched far enough for rent. Once when Daniel was 13 and obsessed with fencing after watching a movie, she sold her grandmother's earrings to pay for 1 semester of fencing lessons. He'd cried when he found out, begged her to return the check, but she had only smiled. "It was worth it," she said. "You're worth it." Now, at 67, Evelyn's knees ached more often, and her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. But her heart? It was still Daniel's. She kept all his school drawings in a file cabinet. She reread his college essays from time to time. When he landed his first job, she framed the offer letter. When he called to say he met someone, Sophie, her heart soared. "She's elegant, smart, a little intense," he had laughed. Evelyn had smiled at his excitement, but something in her stomach had tensed, a whisper of intuition she'd learned not to ignore. Still, she welcomed Sophie with kindness, invited her to dinner, complimented her shoes, asked about her family. Sophie was polite, distant, efficient, But Evelyn tried, because that's what mothers do. So when the wedding plans began, Evelyn never asked for credit. She offered the fund quietly, through the planner. She told Daniel he didn't need to worry about cost. "Focus on the joy," she said. "Let me handle the rest." And he had, but joy didn't come for Evelyn, not in the phone calls that grew shorter, not in the invitations to planning meetings that never arrived, not in the way Sophie stopped replying to her emails. Evelyn told herself not to overthink. "They're busy," she murmured. "It's not personal." But it was. The someday jar sat full, ready. But Evelyn, for the first time, began to wonder. Was there a seat saved for her at the celebration she helped build? It began with missed calls, not missed as in unanswered, but missed in meaning. Daniel started replying with "can't talk now" or "will call later," and often the calls never came. Evelyn told herself it was normal. He was in love, he was planning a wedding, he was busy. She even said it aloud sometimes, as if hearing it would make it true. The text messages changed too. They used to be filled with jokes, updates, photos from his day. Now they were just logistics. "Won't make it this weekend. Working late. We'll try to visit next month." Sophie's name rarely appeared, but her presence hung behind every word. Evelyn noticed the change in his tone, the way he hesitated before mentioning her, as if he was guarding something, or someone. The last time Daniel came home for dinner, he spent most of it glancing at his phone. Evelyn had made his favorite, chicken pot pie with extra thyme, but he barely touched it. When she asked how wedding planning was going, he only said, "It's mostly Sophie and her mom handling things." She nodded, tried to smile. "And your part?" "I just show up when they need me," he'd said with a forced chuckle. That night, she stood in the kitchen long after he left, scraping untouched pie into the trash. It was a small grief, but it stung. 2 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just her name printed in gold foil. Evelyn Mathers. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, heart fluttering. The invitation inside was elegant, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. She ran her fingers over the names, Daniel Mathers and Sophie Caldwell. It listed the date, time, location. That was it. No note, no "we can't wait to see you," no "thank you, Mom, for everything." Not even a handwritten signature, just information. She flipped the envelope, checked the inside, the corners, nothing more. It felt like a notice, not an invitation, and something was off. The return label wasn't Daniel's address. She called the printer, small name on the back of the card, and asked casually who had placed the order. "Oh," the woman said, "that was Geraldine Caldwell. She requested the guest list be mailed directly from our office." Evelyn thanked her and hung up. Her throat tightened. So that was it. Not only had she been left out of the planning, not only had she funded the entire event without being asked what she wanted to wear, where she'd sit, who she'd see, but now she hadn't even been important enough to receive the invitation from her own son. It was procedural, administrative, a formality. And Geraldine? A woman who once told Evelyn she admired her simple lifestyle in a tone that dripped with veiled condescension? She had reduced Evelyn to a name on a list, checked off like a delivery address. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table for a long time, the card in her lap, the envelope beside her like an accusation. She remembered Daniel at age 7, running up the school steps with a paper crown on his head, shouting, "My mom's the queen!" He had made her that crown for Mother's Day, glued macaroni and all. Now she was just Evelyn Mathers, one of 200 people on Geraldine's spreadsheet. The feeling wasn't anger, not yet, it was loss. The loss of something that hadn't fully disappeared, but had changed shape, slipped through her fingers while she wasn't watching. She placed the card on the mantel beside a photo of her and Daniel from his college graduation. He had his arm around her shoulders in that picture, eyes bright, smiling. She remembered what he whispered that day just before they walked off campus. "Couldn't have done it without you." She stared at that photo for a long time, then picked up the card again. No seat assignment, no dress code, no RSVP return envelope, just a digital code in the bottom corner. Scan to confirm attendance. It felt corporate, cold, and Evelyn, who had saved for 2 decades to give her son the wedding of his dreams, suddenly realized that dream didn't include her, at least not as more than a line item. She opened her email, searched for messages from Daniel. There were a few, all short, none about the wedding. The last one had been a link to a registry, sent without a message. She clicked it now. Every item was from high-end retailers, imported glassware, cashmere throws, artisanal knife sets. The kind of list curated by someone who thought weddings were performances, not unions. She noticed the footer. Curated by Sophie and Geraldine. Her name wasn't anywhere. Not in the planning, not in the message, not even in the memory. That night, Evelyn poured herself a cup of tea and sat in the dark. The house around her was silent, but her mind was a storm. She had built her life around the belief that sacrifice would be seen, that love, given quietly, consistently, would someday be reflected back. But sometimes she now understood, love was mistaken for obligation, and sacrifices, when invisible, became expected. The tea turned cold. Evelyn stood, walked to the mantel, and turned the invitation face down. Something was shifting inside her, and she didn't know yet, but this was the moment everything changed. The morning of the wedding arrived, bright and brisk. Evelyn had pressed her dress the night before, a soft navy sheath with lace sleeves and a pearl brooch at the collar. Simple, respectful, elegant. She curled her hair, dabbed on a hint of blush, and applied her lipstick with a steady hand. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You're going for him. Just for him." She left the house early, wanting to be punctual. The drive to the venue was over an hour, winding through country roads and into a sprawling estate where the ceremony would be held. She had never been there before, but she recognized the photos. Daniel had posted them on social media a few months back, smiling in a selfie with Sophie in front of the ivy-covered archway. As she stepped out of the car, the air was filled with soft music and the scent of hydrangeas. The gravel crunched under her heels as she walked toward the grand glass hall where guests were already milling about. Evelyn felt the nerves rise in her throat, but she took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She smiled at the first woman she passed, someone around her age, likely a guest from Sophie's side. The woman gave a quick, awkward nod and looked away. Inside the venue, everything glimmered. Chandeliers sparkled. A string quartet played near a floral wall where guests were taking photos. People chatted in clusters, laughter floating in the air. But no one approached Evelyn. She scanned the room, hoping for Daniel, or even Sophie. Instead, she spotted Geraldine Caldwell, impeccably dressed in an ivory suit, holding court with a group of relatives. Geraldine glanced at Evelyn briefly, her expression unreadable, and then turned back to her conversation as if she hadn't seen her at all. Evelyn swallowed. She moved toward the check-in table where a young woman with a headset and clipboard was greeting guests. Evelyn waited patiently, then gave her name. "Oh," the planner said, flipping through the list. Evelyn Mathers, right?" Evelyn nodded. The planner looked again, her brow furrowing. "I'm so sorry, you're not on the seating chart. Let me just—" She waved over another assistant, whispered something, then turned back. "We're at capacity for the ceremony space. There was a miscommunication with the guest list. I think there's a standing area in the back, if that's okay." Evelyn's lips parted slightly. I funded this wedding." The planner blinked, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm so sorry. I just go off the final guest registry. I was told to follow what Geraldine Caldwell submitted." From the corner of her eye, Evelyn saw Daniel approaching. Relief washed over her for a moment, until she saw his face. He wasn't smiling. His tie was askew, his eyes darted. "Mom," he said, stepping close, offering a half hug that felt like a formality. "I didn't think you'd come this early." "I was told there's no seat for me," Evelyn said quietly. He looked at the planner, then at the ground. "It's complicated." "What's complicated about a mother attending her son's wedding?" Daniel winced. "There was a mix-up with the chart. Sophie's parents, they have a lot of family coming in. I should have checked." "You didn't check," Evelyn said, her voice still calm. "You let someone else decide whether I belonged here." Daniel looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. "Can we talk about this after, please?" Evelyn took a step back. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she refused to let him see. She looked around the room again. No one was looking at her. No one was smiling. She was invisible in a sea of white and gold and forced civility. Sophie appeared near the altar, radiant in her dress, flanked by bridesmaids. When she saw Evelyn, her expression hardened. She turned to Geraldine and whispered something. Geraldine's eyes flicked toward Evelyn, then narrowed slightly. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Evelyn turned back to her son. I won't stay where I'm not welcome. Mom, please don't make a scene. She stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. I won't. And then, without another word, she walked out. The sun outside was just beginning to dip behind the trees. Birds chirped in the distance. Everything was beautiful. But to Evelyn, it felt like the world had gone gray. She reached her car, opened the door, sat down, and placed her hands on the steering wheel. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she sat and sat, until the music faded from behind the glass walls and her heart settled from its storm. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. There was one unread email from the planner. Subject, Final Vendor Authorization. At the bottom, click to approve final payment. Evelyn stared at it, and without hesitation she tapped Decline. The silence inside Evelyn's car was thick, padded with disbelief and something colder. Clarity. Her fingers hovered above the screen of her phone, the words Final Vendor Authorization glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. She hadn't realized until now. She hadn't signed. Weeks ago, she had reviewed the vendor contracts, the floral invoices, the catering spreadsheets, all prepared through the wedding planner. She had created the fund, yes, but intentionally left her signature pending on the final payment to ensure everything was aligned. The planner had emailed her twice, gently reminding her that a final click was needed to authorize the full release of funds. She had meant to do it the morning of the wedding. She had waited, and now she understood why. It was instinct, something deep and unspoken. Maybe she'd sensed the shift weeks ago when Sophie stopped answering her calls, or when Daniel stopped using the word mom in texts. Maybe it was just years of learning how to survive heartbreak that had taught her to keep one last piece of power for herself. She stared out at the venue, its elegant windows gleaming like polished ice. Inside, the guests would soon take their seats. There'd be speeches, toasts, dancing. And Evelyn? She wasn't even considered. Not even an afterthought. Just erased. Her chest tightened, but she didn't cry. The tears had dried somewhere between the check-in table and Daniel's soft, apologetic eyes. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt steel. She opened the email again. A large button at the bottom read, "Click here to finalize and release funds." She tapped Decline. A small confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure?" Yes, she was. She tapped again. Confirmation. Payment authorization canceled. Contract status terminated. She set the phone down on the passenger seat and breathed long and slow. It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't rage, it was balance. Evelyn looked down at her lap, at the creases in her dress from the drive, the pearl brooch still glinting like a quiet reminder of her dignity. She hadn't made a scene, she hadn't screamed, she hadn't shamed anyone. She had simply removed herself, and with her went the foundation of the entire event. She turned off her phone, let the messages pile up. She didn't want to read the apologies that would come too late, or the explanations wrapped in guilt and excuses. She knew what they would say. It wasn't my decision. I didn't know. We meant no harm. But harm had been done, and she would not ignore it. Evelyn started the car. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she backed out of the parking lot. The estate slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror, the laughter and music a faint echo swallowed by trees. It wasn't until she reached the highway that she realized she was humming, an old song, something from her youth, soft and steady. By the time she arrived home, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The porch light clicked on automatically. She stepped inside, kicked off her shoes, and walked straight to the kitchen. She didn't bother turning on the overhead light. Instead, she lit the stove, set the kettle to boil, and stood in the dim glow of the flame. The air felt different now, lighter. Not because she was happy, but because something had shifted. She had reclaimed herself, her place, her voice, her worth, and they hadn't even noticed it slipping away. She poured hot water over the tea leaves, let it steep in silence. Then she walked to the living room, sat on the couch, and lifted the wedding invitation off the mantel. She turned it over in her hands, read the names again. Daniel Mathers and Sophie Caldwell. Elegant script, cold paper. She placed it back face down. Then for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not a wide grin, just the curve of someone who had walked through fire barefoot and made it to the other side. There was a knock at the door. She didn't answer. It came again, firmer this time. Still she stayed seated. Whatever storm was coming, she would face it, but not tonight. Tonight she sipped her tea, turned off the lights, and watched the darkness settle around her like a cloak. Because now the world was about to learn. Evelyn Mathers did not fund her own disappearance. She just rewrote the story. The first wave came with a message from her neighbor Janice. "Have you seen this? You're going viral." Evelyn blinked at the screen. The text came with a link, a TikTok video. She hesitated, then tapped it. The footage was grainy, taken from a phone, likely shaky in someone's nervous hands. It showed her leaving the wedding venue, her navy dress crisp, her back straight, her pace deliberate. No screaming, no spectacle, just a woman walking out of a building that didn't have a seat for her. The caption read, "She paid for the whole wedding, and they didn't even give her a chair. Mom queen behavior." The comment section was on fire. "She's a legend." Respect. That's how you exit a place you weren't respected in. "I want to be her when I grow up." This is how you reclaim your power. By the next morning, the video had hit 1 million views. Then local media picked it up. Anonymous source confirms mother of groom funded the event, was not on guest list. People started piecing it together. Someone tagged Evelyn's Facebook. Photos from the engagement party surfaced, clips of Daniel hugging his mom. A few guests who'd been there quietly posted their own stories. "I thought it was weird that she wasn't sitting up front. She looked so sad but didn't say a word." Sophie's mom kept saying they had limited capacity, but there were at least 20 empty seats. Evelyn said nothing. She watched it unfold from the quiet of her living room, curled in her armchair with a blanket over her knees. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but she didn't reply. Not to old friends, not to former co-workers, not even to Daniel. She was tired. She wasn't basking in the attention. She wasn't triumphant. She was processing. And for once, she let the world speak before she did. Then came the twist. A blog post surfaced on a gossip website. The truth about the viral wedding mom. Sources say she was emotionally controlling. It claimed Evelyn had always been manipulative, that she used guilt to control Daniel, that she threatened not to support the wedding unless Sophie obeyed her rules, that she weaponized money. The post quoted anonymous family friends. They, no names, no evidence, and suddenly the tide shifted. Comments began to split. Wait, what if she was toxic? I mean, you never know someone's story. Maybe there's more to this than just a forgotten chair. Evelyn's chest ached as she read. It was like watching her own reflection warp in real time. Then one morning, she woke up to something worse. A post on her own Facebook page. She hadn't written it. It read, "I'm sorry for how I handled the situation. I should have supported my son, not sabotaged his happiness. My emotions got the best of me. Please don't blame Sophie. She did what she had to." The post was already live for 4 hours. Dozens of comments poured in. "I knew she was faking it." Good, she finally admits it. "Too little, too late, lady." Evelyn's hands shook as she logged in, changed her password, deleted the post. She checked her email. Nothing. She checked her phone. 6 missed calls from blocked numbers and 1 from Daniel. She let it go to voicemail. Then she called Clara. Clara was a former student of hers, now a lawyer, who had once sent Evelyn a thank you card for encouraging her to apply to law school. "You said my voice mattered," Clara had written. "Now I want to make sure yours always does." Clara picked up on the second ring. "It started," Evelyn said simply. "I've seen it," Clara replied. "We need to act." "It was a fake post," Evelyn whispered. "They hacked me." "I know," Clara said. "We're going to get ahead of it, but you need to prepare. This isn't about money anymore. It's about narrative." Evelyn closed her eyes. "I don't want to fight." "You don't have to fight," Clara said, "but you have to tell the truth." Evelyn looked around her home. The couch Daniel had napped on as a teenager, the framed drawings he'd made in 2nd grade, the clock that had ticked through every one of her sacrifices. "I will," she said, "but not for revenge." "For what then?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "For dignity." Clara arrived at Evelyn's house that afternoon with a laptop, a notepad, and a folder thicker than Evelyn expected. "We're going to take control of the story," she said simply, setting everything on the dining table. "You don't need to argue with trolls online. You need to show the receipts." Evelyn poured them both tea, her hands steadier than they had been that morning. She sat across from Clara, watching her former student switch seamlessly into legal mode, focused, fast, and sharp. "First," Clara said, "we'll gather all documentation, contracts, payment logs, emails, and any messages between you and the planner. We'll issue a public statement with facts, not emotion. Second, I'll reach out to a journalist I trust, someone with ethics. We'll give them the exclusive. Your voice, your version. You lead the narrative." Evelyn nodded slowly, but she felt the weight begin to press again. Because no matter how much proof she had, she knew what public opinion could do. People didn't always care about facts. They cared about spectacle. And right now, she was the villain in a very public wedding drama. That night, a tabloid blog ran a headline: "Mother cancels son's wedding over seating snub, petty or power-hungry." The article quoted a close family friend who claimed Evelyn had always been a bit much, that she had tried to insert herself into every part of Daniel's life, that she had always struggled to let go. It hurt, because it wasn't false in the way lies are, it was twisted, reshaped. Yes, she had been present. Yes, she had cared deeply, but that wasn't control, that was love. Still, the seed was planted, the internet took sides. Some called her bold, others called her bitter. Strangers dissected her life without ever hearing her speak. And then, the email came. It was after midnight. Evelyn was alone, curled on the couch in her robe, the TV playing quietly in the background. Her phone buzzed once, no subject line, just a sender name she didn't recognize. Truth Teller 89, she opened it. There were only 2 lines of text. "You think this is over? You embarrassed the wrong people? We're watching." Attached was a photo of Evelyn, taken from outside her house through the kitchen window. She was in her robe, holding a mug, looking out, unaware. The image was crisp, too close, too still. Her heart thudded. She stood up, turned toward the kitchen, curtains drawn, doors locked. But the sense of exposure was immediate, a cold hand on the back of her neck. She forwarded the email to Clara with shaking fingers. Clara called within minutes. "Do not delete anything," she said. "We're filing immediately. This is harassment." Evelyn's voice was small. "They know where I live." "I'm contacting a digital forensics expert," Clara said, "and the police. This isn't just about social perception anymore, it's a threat." They met the next morning at Clara's office, the folder now replaced by a thick binder labeled Halverson versus Caldwell. "Do you want to pursue civil action?" Clara asked. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She thought about Daniel, his smile as a child, his unsure eyes at the wedding. And then she thought of Sophie, the calculated coldness, the performance, the way she looked at Evelyn like a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. "Yes," Evelyn said, "but I want it public. I won't be erased in silence." Clara nodded. "Then we'll proceed, and I'll leak the photo to the media, anonymously. Let people see what you're dealing with." Evelyn agreed, though her stomach twisted at the thought. That afternoon, the first news article hit. New development, viral wedding story involves harassment allegation, anonymous threats. The photo of Evelyn through the window was blurred for privacy, but the tone had shifted. The reporter wrote with more balance, less sensationalism. Words like victim of digital stalking and emotional manipulation began to appear. Still, it wasn't enough, because for every article that defended her, another twisted the story again. One headline read, "Drama Mom Strikes Back, Taking Her Son's Bride to Court." It wasn't about truth anymore. It was about who shouted louder, and the chaos was growing. Evelyn's phone rang with unknown numbers. Reporters left messages. One news anchor even showed up at her front step, hoping for an interview. She didn't open the door, not yet. She wasn't ready, but she would be, because the fear was no longer a shadow behind her. It was a storm she had stepped into willingly, and she had no plans of turning back. It began with a press release. Clara drafted every word with precision, then handed it to Evelyn for final approval. The document was clean, emotionless, and damning. It included screenshots of every payment Evelyn had made toward the wedding. Deposits for the venue, receipts from the florist, transfers to the planner, contracts signed only by Evelyn, with Sophie and Geraldine CC'd but never involved financially. It also included a photo of the wedding invitation, front and back, highlighting the lack of any personal note, name, or greeting. A guest list spreadsheet was attached, obtained through the planner, showing that Evelyn Mathers had been manually removed by someone named G. Caldwell. At the bottom of the packet was Evelyn's short statement. "This is not an attempt to seek revenge. It is an effort to correct the narrative. I gave everything to help build that day. I was not invited to sit in it. This is what erasure looks like." Within 24 hours, the story was everywhere. The hashtags shifted again. Mom Queen was back, but it now shared space with others. Hat Receipt Queen, Hat Not Just a Mother, and the most poignant, As She Paid, She Left. A new wave of commentary rolled in. "This changes everything. She literally funded the wedding. You don't ghost your investor. This woman is dignity personified." I take back what I said. She didn't ruin the wedding. She saved her self-respect. A few news outlets reached out asking for interviews. Clara declined most of them, but selected one, a long-form piece with the Daily Journal, known for investigative integrity. The journalist, a woman named Fiona Lynn, came to Evelyn's house on a quiet Tuesday morning. She brought no camera, only a recorder and a calm voice. Evelyn sat with her in the sunlit living room, Clara beside her, and for the first time, told the story in her own words. Not as a viral icon, but as a woman, a mother, whose love had been misunderstood, repackaged as interference, and rejected at the gate. Fiona listened. She didn't interrupt, and when the article came out 3 days later, it wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. Titled, "The Woman They Erased, How One Mother Funded a Wedding She Wasn't Welcome At." The piece went viral within hours, but the internet wasn't the only one paying attention. That evening, Evelyn opened her door and found Daniel standing on her porch. No suit this time, no polished hair or forced smiles, just jeans, a hoodie, and eyes rimmed with regret. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. Evelyn didn't speak. She stepped aside. They sat in silence for a while. The kettle hissed on the stove, but neither moved to pour tea. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I read the article," he said, "and I saw the files Clara posted. I didn't know it was all that, not the details." "You knew enough," Evelyn said, voice calm. He nodded. "I did." More silence. "She controlled everything," he said at last, "from the start. The venue, the dress code, the registry, every call went through her or her mother. I let it happen because it was easier." Evelyn studied him, her son, the boy she raised, the man he had become. "I got an email 3 weeks before the wedding," Daniel admitted, "from Sophie's planner. She CC'd me by accident. It had an updated guest list. Your name wasn't on it." Evelyn's throat tightened. Daniel kept talking, his voice small. "I told myself it was a mistake, that Geraldine would fix it, that Sophie would catch it. I didn't want to cause a fight so close to the wedding. I didn't want to rock the boat." "So you said nothing," Evelyn said. "I thought you'd still come," he whispered, "that it'd work itself out." "But I wasn't on the list," she replied. "There wasn't even a chair." He covered his face with his hands. "I'm sorry. I was a coward." There it was, the twist Evelyn never expected, not from Sophie, but from her own son. He had known, and he chose silence, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of confrontation, fear of Sophie's reaction. He had chosen peace over protection. And Evelyn? She'd been the casualty. She didn't yell, didn't weep, just sat letting it sink in. "I should have fought for you," Daniel said. "I should have pushed back." "Yes," Evelyn replied simply. They sat that way for a while, two people in the aftermath of quiet betrayal. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed screenshot. "I saved this," he said. "Sophie once sent a message to her maid of honor. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did." He handed it over. Evelyn read the words slowly. "We're not giving Margaret a front row seat. She'll make the ceremony about her. Put her near the back, like the help." Evelyn blinked. "Margaret," she whispered. "She didn't even know my name." Daniel nodded, ashamed. She never tried, and I let her. Evelyn folded the paper neatly, set it on the coffee table. Then finally she said, "So what now?" Daniel looked up. "I ended the engagement." Evelyn raised her eyebrows. "She threatened me last night," he said. "Said if I sided with you, she'd make sure everyone believed you were unstable, that she'd leak stories from your past, make you look like a manipulator." Evelyn's voice was quiet. "And you believed she would?" "Yes," he said, "because she already started." Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment after Daniel's confession, her tea untouched on the table between them. She studied her son, not the boy she once protected, but the man who had allowed her erasure. Even with his head bowed and voice trembling, part of her bristled at how long it had taken for him to speak. "I'm sorry," he repeated, softer now, as though the words would finally bridge the canyon between them. Evelyn looked him in the eyes. "You waited until it was safe, until she couldn't hurt you anymore. That's not an apology, Daniel. That's convenience." Daniel's face crumpled. "I didn't know how deep it had gone. I didn't know she was capable of—" "But I did," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "I saw it long before you did. And still, I stayed quiet. For you." He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. "I'm not looking for a resolution in this room. I'm done asking to be believed." She stood and walked to her desk, pulling out a folder. Clara had been compiling everything, emails, photos, legal statements. Evelyn set the folder down on the table. "I'm holding a press conference," she said. "No more silence, no more anonymous statements. If the world wants a show, I'll give them one, with the truth as the headline." Daniel looked stunned. "Mom, that's serious exposure. Are you sure?" Evelyn nodded. "I let them write the story once. I won't let them write the ending." The next 48 hours moved swiftly. Clara secured a venue, contacted reporters, coordinated with security. They vetted every media outlet, choosing those known for balanced coverage. A few tried to pull sensationalist angles, but Clara shut them down. "This is about narrative, not drama," she told them firmly. Meanwhile, Daniel remained by Evelyn's side, guilt hanging from him like a shadow. The morning of the conference, Evelyn wore a deep green blazer, confident but grounded. Her hair was pinned back. Her expression was composed. She didn't rehearse a speech. She didn't need one. The room filled quickly. Cameramen adjusted lenses. Journalists murmured. Hashtags began trending before Evelyn even stepped to the podium. She began simply. "My name is Evelyn Mathers. I'm a mother, a teacher, a woman who spent 20 years preparing a gift that was rejected before it was opened." She laid out the facts, the payments, the contract terms, the guest list edits, the hacked account, the photo taken from outside her home. She didn't weep, she didn't rage. She told the story plainly, with dignity that commanded silence. Midway through the conference, Clara stepped forward and handed Evelyn a small flash drive. Evelyn turned to the reporters. "And now," she said, "my son would like to share something." Daniel walked up slowly, his face pale but determined. He took the microphone and plugged the flash drive into the media console. "I didn't speak up when I should have," he said. "But I kept everything, every voicemail, every message, this one I didn't delete." He pressed play. A voice crackled through the speakers, sharp, female, unmistakably Sophie. "If your mother keeps trying to be involved, I swear to God, Daniel, I will ruin her. I'll make people think she's lost her mind, that she's unstable, controlling. No one will believe her. They'll say she's bitter. I'll make her a joke, a meme, and she'll have no one left." Gasps echoed across the room. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't need to. The audio said more than her silence ever could. Reporters immediately raised their hands, questions flying. But Evelyn only said, "Let that speak for itself," before stepping away from the podium. The headlines were instant. Groom's ex-fiancé caught on tape threatening mother of the groom. From scorn to survivor, Evelyn Mathers reclaims her voice. Wedding sabotage audio leaked. Public turns on Sophie Caldwell. Evelyn watched it unfold with quiet satisfaction. Not revenge, not triumph, just truth. The next morning, Sophie's brand sponsorships disappeared. Wedding vendors issued public apologies. Geraldine was removed from several charity boards she sat on. And Evelyn? She received dozens of messages, some from strangers, some from women who had once stood in similar shadows, but the one that mattered most came from a young woman she didn't know. The message read, "Thank you. Because of you, I didn't go back to a man who made me feel small. You made me brave." Evelyn read it twice. Then she smiled, not because she had one, but because she had finally been seen. For days after the press conference, Evelyn's name was everywhere, not as a villain, not as a footnote, but as the woman who had turned a public betrayal into a statement of strength. The clip of Sophie's voice echoed through every news segment and podcast. "I'll make her a joke, a meme." But what followed wasn't a joke. It was a reckoning. That weekend, a new video surfaced, this time from a guest at the engagement dinner filmed months ago and forgotten until the story went viral. The clip showed Sophie at a table of bridesmaids, a wine glass in hand, her voice mocking. "She'll probably show up in one of those outdated floral dresses," Sophie laughed, mimicking an older woman's posture. "Then cry during the speech like it's about her. Honestly, I'm moving her to the back. Can you imagine having to look at her the whole time?" Laughter erupted around the table. The camera zoomed briefly to Evelyn, seated quietly at the end of the room, unaware. The caption read, "This aged like milk." Within hours, the video hit 2 million views. Then came the fallout. Brand by brand, Sophie's partnerships dissolved. Skincare companies pulled their logos from her page. A bridal app she had helped promote deleted all her tutorials. Her influencer platform, built on carefully curated aesthetics and a modern elegance persona, began to crumble. Commenters turned. She mocked her fiancé's mom while taking her money? And this is who people wanted us to admire? The real queen was the one in the navy dress. Sophie went dark on all social platforms, but her silence wasn't the end. It was the pause before another strike. 3 days later, a new headline appeared, crafted carefully by a sympathetic columnist and backed by a PR firm known for its crisis management strategies. Family Insider speaks, groom's mother may be struggling with delusions. The article cited concerns about Evelyn's mental health, suggesting that she had imagined offenses and interpreted miscommunications as personal attacks. It quoted an unnamed close family member who alleged Evelyn had exhibited paranoid behavior for years. The source, of course, was Geraldine. Evelyn read the article twice, calm at first, then furious. Because this wasn't just an attempt to reclaim Sophie's reputation. This was an attempt to erase hers. The piece spread fast. Some news outlets picked it up cautiously, others gleefully, hungry for another twist. Was it all in her head? Did the mother sabotage the wedding for attention? Clara arrived within an hour. "She's planting seeds of doubt," Clara said. "They know Sophie's done, but if they can tarnish your credibility, even a little, they can soften the blow." Evelyn's fingers curled around her teacup. "She wants me to look unstable." Clara nodded. "That's the strategy, and she's hoping you'll break. Cry on camera, scream online, do anything emotional that proves her point." Evelyn didn't scream. She opened her desk drawer instead and pulled out a blue folder. Inside were psychiatric evaluations from her routine medical checkups, clean, consistent, and recent. A personal note from her therapist, signed and dated, and a report from the digital forensic analyst Clara had hired after the first threatening email, tracing the burner account back to a device registered under Geraldine's assistant's name. "Let's end this," Evelyn said. Clara smiled. That afternoon, Evelyn gave the Daily Journal a follow-up interview, this time sitting at her kitchen table, windows behind her open, light streaming in. She held nothing back. "They wanted me to question my own memory," she said, "to believe I imagined being removed from my own son's wedding. But I didn't imagine the email. I didn't imagine the contracts I signed. I didn't imagine the photo taken of me through my kitchen window. And I certainly didn't imagine being replaced by someone who only saw me as a threat." The article dropped that night, titled, "The Mother They Tried to Discredit. Evelyn Mathers Fights Back with Receipts." It included direct screenshots, voice analysis confirming Sophie's leaked audio, and excerpts from Geraldine's email that was now part of a harassment investigation. The effect was immediate. The tide turned again, but this time it didn't swing wildly, it settled. Evelyn wasn't trending anymore. She was established, a quiet strength, a cautionary tale, a symbol. When the backlash hit Geraldine, it was swift and silent. Her family foundation lost donors. Her board positions were politely relinquished. Several media outlets that had supported the delusional mother narrative issued retractions. Geraldine responded only once, through a lawyer. "We regret any misunderstanding and hope for healing in the future." Evelyn didn't reply. She didn't need to. She had made her voice loud enough to echo. And in that echo, something shifted, not just for her, but for the people watching. The ones who knew what it felt like to be excluded, diminished, rewritten. They saw her and understood. That collapse wasn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it was the foundation clearing for something better. The courthouse was modest, modern, and filled with more cameras than usual that morning. Press credentials hung from necks like badges of tension. Spectators, journalists, and a few protesters lined the sidewalk. Everyone knew what today was. The hearing wasn't about money anymore. It was about acknowledgement. Evelyn arrived early, accompanied by Clara and two quiet security officers. She wore a navy suit, the same shade as the dress she'd worn to the wedding that wasn't. Her face was composed, her gaze level. She didn't glance at the cameras. She didn't need to. Inside, the chamber buzzed with whispers as Geraldine and Sophie took their seats across the aisle. Geraldine was expressionless, draped in pearls and posture. Sophie looked thinner, more worn. Her once confident walk had dissolved into hesitant steps. The judge called the hearing to order. And then, before any testimony or evidence could be entered, Clara stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, my client is not seeking damages. She is seeking correction. Public disrespect requires public reparation. We request a formal, on-record apology from both parties." The judge turned to Geraldine and Sophie. "Will you comply?" Geraldine's lawyer nodded stiffly. "We are prepared to offer a statement." They stood. Sophie held a piece of paper in her trembling hand. Geraldine did not. Sophie read first, her voice quiet but clear. "I would like to apologize to Ms. Evelyn Mathers for my actions and words. They were hurtful, dismissive, and rooted in misunderstanding and immaturity. I allowed assumptions and pride to cloud my judgment and failed to recognize her place in the life of the man I once loved. I deeply regret the exclusion and pain I caused." She folded the paper, her hands shaking. Geraldine stepped forward without a script. "I apologize to Ms. Mathers," she said, every word polished. "I did not realize how deeply our decisions had impacted her. I was overly protective of my daughter and underestimated the importance of broader family inclusion. We hope this serves as a step toward closure." Evelyn remained still, not cold, centered. The court clerk logged the apologies into record. The judge thanked both parties and closed the hearing. But the real moment happened after. As the reporters rushed forward, pushing microphones toward Geraldine and Sophie, Daniel stepped out from the gallery and onto the courthouse steps. He held his hand up. "I have something to say." The reporters quieted. "I made a mistake," he began. "I let my fiancé and her family decide how much of my mother belonged in my future. I didn't push back. I didn't ask questions. I thought keeping the peace would keep the love. I was wrong." His voice didn't tremble, it rang. "My mother built that wedding. She gave me everything, and I let her be erased, publicly, silently. I won't let that happen again." A few camera shutters clicked. One reporter whispered, "He's pulling the plug," and Daniel confirmed it. "I've ended the engagement. Sophie and I will not be moving forward. I wish her well, but my loyalty from here on begins with the woman who raised me." He turned to Evelyn, who had just stepped out of the courthouse behind him. "I'm sorry, Mom." She didn't run to him. She didn't cry. She simply nodded, and for the first time, Daniel looked at her the way she'd always hoped, with respect. That night, Evelyn hosted a dinner, not at a fancy venue, not for cameras. It was at a local community hall, nothing grand but warm with light and clinking plates. Dozens of women came. Some were strangers, some were old friends. All had once been told there was no seat for them. They called the event the other table. There was no head seat, no speaker's podium, just shared food, soft music, and space for laughter and tears. Evelyn gave a small toast near the end. I know what it feels like, she said, to be uninvited from the moments you waited your whole life to witness, to be made invisible. But here's what they forget. When they push us away from their tables, we learn to build our own. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone clapped, then another, then all. That night, Evelyn didn't check the news. She didn't read comments. She just smiled as she collected empty plates and stories from women who finally felt seen. And she knew something had changed. She wasn't the woman who had been left standing. She was the one who decided what standing meant. Evelyn never set out to become a voice for anyone but herself. Yet in the weeks after the hearing, her inbox filled with invitations, conferences, podcasts, editorial features. Women's groups across the country wanted to hear from her, not because she was dramatic or defiant, but because she had done what so many had feared to do: stand up, walk out, and take everything back. The first invitation came from a mid-sized women's advocacy conference in Chicago. The subject line read, "We'd love for you to share your journey." At first, Evelyn hesitated. She had never spoken to a crowd. She wasn't a performer. But then she thought about all the women who wrote her messages, the ones who said, "You made me braver, the ones who confessed that they too had been erased from weddings, births, even funerals, silently pushed aside for being too much or too old. She accepted. Her first speech was simple. No slides, no graphics, just Evelyn standing behind a wooden lectern, her hands resting gently on the sides. "I don't think of myself as strong," she told the audience. "I just got tired of shrinking." The room was still. When she finished, they stood. The applause was slow at first, then swelling, not because she had said something revolutionary, but because she had said something real. More invites followed: California, New York, Atlanta. Her quiet strength carried across stages and social feeds. Someone approached her after one event and said, "You should write a book." She had never written anything longer than a journal entry. But that night she opened her laptop and typed a title across the screen: "The Seat I Built." The words flowed like breath, not revenge, not a memoir for spectacle, just a story, a roadmap for reclaiming space that should never have been taken. It wasn't long before a publisher reached out. By spring, the book was announced. Evelyn never expected to become a symbol. She only hoped to be a reminder that erasure is not silence, that dignity does not need permission, that women like her were never too much. They were just too overlooked. Then, just as the dust truly began to settle, Evelyn received a letter. It was left in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address, folded carefully inside a plain white envelope. She opened it at the kitchen table, the same place she had once read wedding plans and florist quotes. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. "Geraldine, you won the headlines. You charmed the crowd. But the world moves fast, Evelyn. People forget. And one day when they do, I'll still have my name, my connections, my influence. You've built a table, but don't get too comfortable. Sooner or later, someone else will pull the chair out from under you. And next time, no one will be watching." There was no signature, no threat, not directly, but the message was clear. Evelyn folded the letter once, then again. Then she stood, walked to her backyard garden, and lit a match. The paper caught quickly, curling in on itself, ink fading to ash. She dropped the remnants into a ceramic bowl and watched them smolder. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she simply turned and walked back inside. The final chapter wasn't about retaliation. It was about release. It was Daniel's idea. "I think we need to get out of here," he had said one evening, over a quiet dinner of roasted vegetables and thyme chicken Evelyn had made from an old recipe. "Just us. No phones, no reporters, no internet for a few days." Evelyn didn't respond right away. The silence between them had changed since the hearing, not heavy anymore, but tentative, like a bridge slowly rebuilt, one plank at a time. "Where?" she asked. "There's a place in Maine," he said. "By the water. I used to go there for retreats when work got too much. I think you'd like it." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. 2 weeks later, they were on the road. No airport terminals, no schedules, just the hum of tires against the road and a cooler packed with sandwiches and iced tea. Daniel drove most of the way, occasionally glancing sideways to make sure she was comfortable. Evelyn, for her part, watched the world blur by. Fields, towns, forests, all of it somehow slower, softer than the life she'd left behind. They arrived at a small rental cottage perched on the edge of a rocky coastline. The ocean stretched endlessly, waves whispering secrets to the shore. The air was different there, saltier, freer. Evelyn unpacked slowly, her hands moving with a calm she hadn't felt in years. That first night, they sat outside on the porch with blankets wrapped around their legs, mugs of cocoa in hand. No cameras, no whispers, just a mother and a son side by side. "Do you think it's over?" Daniel asked quietly. Evelyn took a sip, then looked out at the sea. "Some things don't end," she said. "They settle." Daniel nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner." "I know," she replied. "I've known for a while." He turned to her. "Why didn't you say anything?" She smiled faintly. "Because it wasn't about you, not entirely. It was about what I let happen to me. I needed to find my way back to myself." He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back and said, "I'm proud of you." Evelyn chuckled softly. "That's new." "No," he said, "just overdue." The next few days passed in gentle rhythm. They walked trails, cooked together, read on opposite sides of the same room. Daniel showed her how to use a kayak. She taught him how to make perfect tea. There was laughter, real, deep, unforced. And with each moment, the years of silence began to dissolve. One afternoon, they sat on a bench overlooking the beach. Children played in the sand below. An old couple walked hand in hand near the water's edge. Evelyn watched quietly. "You ever think about remarrying?" Daniel asked suddenly. She smiled. "Once, but I had you, and I wasn't willing to share." Daniel looked sheepish. "I think I understand that better now." They sat in silence for a while. "Mom," he said, "I want you to know I'm here now. Fully. No more disappearing acts. No more letting people talk over you." Evelyn didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later that evening, as the sky turned gold and lavender, Evelyn walked down to the beach alone. The tide was low, the air cool. She slipped off her sandals and let the wet sand hug her feet. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to defend herself. She didn't feel erased. She felt present, whole. She looked out over the horizon where sea met sky and thought about chairs and tables and guest lists and names scratched off and voices drowned out. She had spent years waiting for someone to offer her a seat, begging quietly, then loudly. Then with silence so thick it filled every room she entered, but not anymore. She hadn't just reclaimed a chair. She had built an entire table, sturdy, weathered, made of every moment she'd endured. A table where no one had to ask permission to sit. And suddenly, she didn't need applause. She didn't need retribution. She didn't need the world to watch. Because the greatest triumph wasn't headlines or apologies, it was this. Sand under her feet, the sound of her son laughing behind her as he tried to light a fire pit, the smell of salt and smoke, and the peace of knowing she didn't have to fight anymore to be seen. She had become unshakable, not because she had shouted the loudest, but because she had remained standing. And as the wind brushed her face and the waves whispered in her ears, Evelyn Mathers smiled. Victory didn't always look like a courtroom win. Sometimes it looked like calm.